Welcome to Military Analytics. A fierce Ukrainian counteroffensive in the Bakhmut area destroyed Russian tanks and infantry fighting vehicles, inflicting the worst tactical defeat for Kremlin forces in months. Supported by D-64 tanks and M-103 armored personnel carriers, soldiers from Ukraine's 3rd Assault Brigade made great progress in the Ukrainian-controlled area, destroying the chain of Russian defensive positions southwest of Bakhmut in fierce and close combat, according to statements from the commander of the Wagner Group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, and Ukrainian military sources. The key Bakhmut river has completely passed under the control of the Ukrainian army the other day. Prigozhin accused the 72nd Motor Rifle Brigade, the regular Russian infantry unit, holding positions in the area of leaving the fortifications and allowing the attacking Ukrainian troops to encircle the positions of his group. Prigozhin reported that as a result of a strong Ukrainian offensive and the reluctance of the men of the 72nd Brigade to fight to hold their ground, Wagner lost 500 men. Prigozhin also reported that Russian forces in the Bakhmut region had to leave the battlefield 2 kilometers deep and 6 kilometers long. If confirmed, it would be the biggest military loss suffered by the Russian army in the 6-month battle at Bakhmut, where it struggles to advance more than a few dozen meters on a typical battle day. So why did the Russian army fall into such a difficult situation? Many sources associated with the 3rd Assault Brigade, a former territorial defense unit raised in Kiev from elements of the Azov Regiment in the early days of the war, and now a senior offensive unit of the Ukrainian armed forces, confirmed most details of Prigozhin's allegations. A drone video released by the Azov Battalion's media division shows well-equipped soldiers in US-made Vietnam-era M103 armored personnel carriers charging into flattened Russian defensive positions, descending from the air and launching attacks supported by automatic weapon fire and grenades. The spokesperson of the Ukrainian 3rd Assault Brigade reported that the Russian 72nd Infantry Division lost between 200 and 300 men. In addition, multiple sources also state that another attack by the Ukrainian 3rd Assault Brigade in Bakhmut captured Russian war vehicles and prisoners. According to the statement made by the unit, at least 64 Russian soldiers were killed in the attack, but the exact number of casualties was not clear. Azov Battalion founder Andrei Beletsky said the amount of Russian equipment and soldiers detained by Ukrainians was substantial. Video footage showed that Ukrainian tanks were firing at Russian positions at close range, and infantrymen from the 3rd Assault Brigade passed by the bodies at Russian positions. Following these attacks, Ukrainian Ground Forces Commander Oleksandr Chezhky said that Russian troops retreated up to 2 kilometers in parts of the front in the eastern Donetsk region. "We see the results of the effective actions of our troops," explaining that Swirsky's forces are conducting counterattacks on parts of the line of contact around Bakhmut. In some parts of the front, the Russian army could not withstand the attacks of the Ukrainian defenders and retreated up to 2 kilometers, he said. So has Russia given up on Bakhmut? In November, the Kremlin military leadership declared Bakhmut a critical interim target for its then working plan to seize and annex Ukraine's Donetsk region. In the months that followed, an offensive unit of Ukraine's elite units entered and exited Bakhmut to counter the Russian attacks in fierce, often house-to-house fighting. This assault team, together with the 3rd Assault Brigade, attacked the Russian troops in Bakhmut with the 5th Assault 92nd Mechanized Presidential Guard 79th and 80th Brigades of the Ukrainian Army. The White House noted that the United States estimates that Russia has lost as many as 100,000 men in largely unsuccessful attacks in the past 5 months, with the vast majority of those casualties coming from the Wagner Group of soldiers. The Ukrainian army's counteroffensive at Bakhmut was the most decisive success on the Ukrainian battlefield in late January and early February, when a pair of Russian Marine brigades heavily fortified with tanks attacked positions held by the 72nd Mechanized Infantry Brigade of the Ukrainian Army in the city of Volodar. Russian forces had suffered massive losses in dense minefields and heavy artillery strikes in terms of the course of the Ukrainian war. The Bakhmut war began to gain special importance. As predicted, the Ukrainian counteroffensive started from Bakhmut, assuming the bulk of the Russian army deployed in Ukraine is here. The Ukrainian offensive will not only drive the Russian army out of Bakhmut but will also deal a deep blow to the war effort. Over the weekend, U.S. President Joe Biden said more than 100,000 soldiers were killed and wounded in Russia's fight for the Ukrainian city of Bakhmut. While the U.S. president was speaking at the G7 summit in Japan, Russia and Ukraine made competing claims about the situation in the besieged city. Over the weekend, Russia claimed it had finally captured the city, but the next day Ukraine denied that the city fell and said fighting was ongoing. Biden is Bakhmut lost. There is such a discussion, but the situation is that the Russians suffered more than 100,000 casualties in Bakhmut. It is difficult to compensate, he said earlier this week. The Ukrainian General Staff claimed that the total number of Russian soldiers killed or injured during the Ukrainian war exceeds 200,000. The figure means that Russia has lost a huge number of soldiers, a number larger than the armies of many countries in the world. These losses are roughly corroborated by the Ukrainian General Staff, US and UK intelligence, independent experts, and other sources. British Defense Secretary Ben Wallace has stated that he thinks Russia's full-scale war casualties have already exceeded 220,000, with casualties and injuries indeed considering the current situation. Mr. Wallace's prediction seems to have been confirmed. So what is the situation in Bakhmut with so many losses? The Ukrainian military said it was in control of an insignificant part of Bakhmut, which Russia claimed to have captured but was advancing on its flanks the day before. The Wagner mercenary group and the Russian army claimed to have taken complete control of Bakhmut, the scene of the longest and bloodiest battle of the Ukrainian war. Oleksandr Kursky, the commander of the Ukrainian ground forces, said, "Although we currently control an insignificant part of Bakhmut, our defense does not lose its level of fire. We continue to move forward on the wings in the suburbs of Bakhmut," he said. Earlier, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky said at the G7 summit in Hiroshima that Bakhmut was not occupied. Kursky described the army as continuing to defend Bakhmut and the situation of Ukrainian soldiers in Bakhmut as difficult but under control. Wagner's patron, Yevgeny Prigozhin, whose fighters led the Russian advance into Bakhmut, insisted that there were no Ukrainian troops left in Bakhmut. Prigozhin said, "There is not a single Ukrainian soldier in Bakhmut because we stopped taking captives. There are many bodies of Ukrainian soldiers," Bakhmut said. He was under Russian control down to the last centimeter. Prigozhin noted that either Zelensky was not telling the truth or, like many of our own military leaders, did not know what was going on in the field and most likely could not find out. It is believed that both sides suffered heavy losses in the Battle of Bakhmut, but the Ukrainian army's casualties are not of the kind to be taken into account in the face of the size of the Russian casualties. If this continues, Russia will soon be in a situation where it will not be able to find soldiers, not only in Bakhmut but also to protect its borders. The brave ally of the Kiev administration has taken incredible steps to change the fate of clashes in favor of Ukraine so far by pouring its game-changing military equipment into Ukrainian territory against the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Turkey turned to brand new and innovative military resources so that the Ukrainians could prolong the war and eventually achieve victory by closing the Straits of the Black Sea to warships. Turkey paralyzed the movements of the Russian Navy and disrupted the blockade of Ukraine. Turkey has doubled the regional security by sending the TCG Anadolu aircraft carrier to the Black Sea coast. Also, Turkey has the power to put pressure on Russia in the grain deal. Despite the most difficult election process in Turkey's history, the Turkish government did not turn its back on Ukraine and the world in this difficult process. Thanks to Turkey's intense efforts this week, the grain agreement was extended for 2 more months, and the world got a little further away from the food crisis, breaking new ground in many areas. Turkey also didn't hesitate to share these new weapons systems and military ammunition with the Ukrainian army. However, in recent days, a completely different military ammunition that Turkey has sent to the Ukrainian army has come to the fore like a bomb. Despite all the difficulties Turkey faced, the Turkish administration didn't fail to send powerful ammunition to Ukraine and gave Ukraine the powerful hammers that would strike a sledgehammer blow against the Russian army. Turkish-made 155mm M48 A3A1 artillery shells capable of mass attack are seen as Ukraine's new multiple sledgehammer blow. In fact, initially the Ukrainian army had ordered 100,000 artillery shells of 155mm from Turkey. After this order, there were rumors that these bullets were used on Ukrainian soil due to Turkey's geostrategic position and its position with Russia. Publicly giving military aid to Ukraine may jeopardize the security of NATO, the Black Sea, and the world's grain. For this reason, Turkey's aid to Ukraine is generally not disclosed and is carried out in secret. For these reasons, Turkey has fallen behind among the countries that provide military aid to Ukraine. Despite this, they managed to send many game-changing weapons to Ukraine. Bayraktar TB2 TRG-230 and now M48 A3A1 impact artillery shells are among the big game changers. According to unconfirmed reports, Turkey had already transferred us designed locally produced cluster bombs defined as dual-purpose developed conventional munitions. Now it has been clearly seen for the first time that Turkish-made 155mm M483A1 shells were used on Ukrainian soil. The saw first was found on the Ukrainian battlefield. It turned out that on the front lines for the first time, the Ukrainians used Turkish-made 155mm 483A1 artillery shells capable of mass attack. Analysts from the Ukraine Weapons Tracker team first drew attention to this at the beginning of the year. It was reported that Ukraine received an unknown number of 155mm PICM shells from Turkey. This abbreviation stands for Dual-Purpose Enhanced Conventional Ammunition. M483A1 shells are produced by the Turkish company. Evidence of its use by the Ukrainian military only surfaced this week. The published photo showed a soldier from the armed forces of Ukraine against the backdrop of a large amount of Turkish ammunition piled in the back of a truck. Each munition is launched from the projectile during its flight and disperses over the area, detonating when it hits the ground or reaches a certain height above the target. This allows you to hit multiple targets simultaneously, which makes this type of projectile particularly effective against manpower and unprotected vehicles. M483A1 cluster shells are renowned for their accuracy and wide range of action. Much more serious, however, is that such shells were supplied to Ukraine by Turkey, which allegedly declared its neutral position in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine earlier. According to the open-source intelligence portal Oryx, Turkey has supplied approximately 35 TB2 UAVs, 24 Bayraktar mini reconnaissance UAVs, TRG-130 guided multiple rocket launchers, 200 BMC Kirpi, MRAP armored vehicles with mine-proof ambush protection, mortars, ammunition, and land. Currently 30 Turkish Otokar-made Cobra 2 4x4 wheeled armored personnel carriers were seen on off-rate train in Romania en route to Ukraine. Later, videos on social media showed the Ukrainian army with a Cobra 2 convoy in the muddy terrain of Bakhmut. In addition, Turkey has allocated ground and airborne electronic warfare equipment and helmets and anti-aircraft vests until the end of November 2022 for the Ukrainian army. The Turkish-made special 155mm howitzer shell is a multi-attack ammunition that Ukraine needs in its most difficult times. The 155mm howitzer shell is one of the most demanded artillery munitions of the war in Ukraine. The US has already shipped more than 1.5 million shells to Ukraine, but Kiev was still looking for more. Apparently the Ukrainians seem to have closed this gap from Turkey. So why do Ukrainians want to use these impact bullets so much on the front lines? Basically, the 155mm squared artillery shell is a very large projectile consisting of 4 pots. These pots are classified as detonating fuse, bullet propellant, and capsule. Each species is about 2 feet long, weighs about 100 pounds, and measures 155mm squared or 6.1 in in diameter. They are used in howitzer systems where large guns are drawn, which is defined by the firing angle range in which the barrels can be adjusted. 155mm squared shells can be configured in many ways. They can be packed with highly explosive material, used precision-guided systems, pierce armor, or produce high fragmentation. POS variants have included smoke projectiles to disguise troop movement or illumination projectiles to reveal an enemy's position. The 155mm squared shell and similar Soviet-era 152mm squared shells are very popular as they provide a good balance between range and warhead size. If you have a bullet that's too small, it won't do enough damage and go far. If you have a larger bullet, you cannot fire it far enough. The 155mm squared is the most common midway, and that is why it's so widely used. The French first developed the 155mm squared projectile to respond to the extensive trench warfare of the First World War, and gas shells were found in the first versions. As World War I continued, the 155mm squared gun became the most common piece of artillery used by the Allies, and the U.S. Army later adopted it as the standard field heavy artillery piece. As military World War II, they used their own version, the one for World War II. After the war, the new NATO alliance adopted the 155mm as the artillery standard. When it came to the Korean War, this 155mm bullet was differentiated. These rounds contained 88 sub-bombs scattered over a wide area to destroy vehicles, equipment, and personnel. Howitzer shots can hit targets 15 to 20 miles away, depending on the type of projectile and the firing system used, making 155mm squared shells highly valuable by ground forces for destroying enemy targets from a protected distance. In addition, the enemies do not have any advance warning of the arrival of these 155mm squared shells, so you can only see the bullet when it hits. It's harder to hide from bullets coming from above. 155mm squared Turkish-made bombs are also dropped from above. This makes it extremely deadly. Ukrainian parliament member Oleksandra Ustinova, who serves on Ukraine's wartime oversight committee, reported that 155mm squared rounds were fired in Ukraine at a rate of 6,000 to 8,000 per day. They were overshadowed by an estimated 40,000 Russian variant howitzer shells fired at them, Ustinov said. On the other hand, the Pentagon had previously announced how many shells it provided in each of the security aid packages sent approximately every 2 weeks to block the flow of weapons and ammunition to Ukraine. The U.S. Department of Defense stopped specifying the number of 155mm shells shipped in each pack in February, citing operational safety. However, the Pentagon shared that it has sent more than 160 155mm squared howitzers, more than 1.5 million 155mm squared artillery shells, and more than 6,500 precision-guided 155mm squared artillery shells to Ukraine. More than 14,155 remote anti-armor mine systems basically consist of all 155mm squared shell filled with 4 mines that scatter on the ground and can neutralize a Russian tank if they pass over them. Along with these shells, other countries also supplied the Ukrainian army with howitzers, but Kiev constantly asked for more. As of last year, Ukrainian authorities were requesting as many as 1,000 howitzer systems to repel Russian forces. Now, with the Turkish-made 155mm squared effective artillery shell, it's estimated that the deficit of the Ukrainian army is largely closed. But Yuri Chernihiv, a member of the Ukrainian parliament, suggested that as Ukraine prepares for a massive counterattack this spring, it will likely need to fire between 7,000 and 9,155mm squared rounds a day. In recent months, the Biden administration has been using its presidential pull to send ammunition directly from U.S. military stockpiles to Ukraine rather than waiting for Ukraine to get there in time for its anticipated counterattack and buying shells from defense firms. Maybe the U.S. administration can send such bullets to the Ukrainian army in line with the statements of Yuri Chernihiv, a member of the Ukrainian parliament. Because the U.S. is also training Ukrainian troops in Germany on how to better use 155mm squared shells in combined arms tactics. For this reason, we may see more detailed studies of the Washington authorities on the 155mm squared bullet in the coming days. Storm Shadow instills confidence in Ukraine and anxiety in Russia. Putting command and control of Russia's logistics at risk makes a significant contribution to shaping the conditions for successful Ukrainian offensive operations. The United Kingdom's government decision to gift Ukraine Storm Shadow cruise missiles provides an important capability to disrupt Russian logistics and command and control. These cruise missiles are creating hurricanes on the front lines. Storm Shadow, with a range of 250 kilometers, has been crushing Russian troops in recent days. Let's take a closer look at the hot breaking points on the front lines, continuing to suffer massive losses since the beginning of the war. Russia has finally lost 450 more of its soldiers in the Mariupol region. As is known, Russian special forces and Marines were redeployed to Mariupol. Last week, Russian soldiers were caught in a barrage of missiles. A shower of missiles blew up the Russian special forces and naval base in the port of Mariupol. British-made Ukrainian Storm Shadow missiles also caused explosions in the Azovstal iron and steel factory area. After the explosions, huge smoke rose into the sky. The exact target of the attacks has not been determined. Strong explosions were also heard in the suburbs of Mariupol and near the airport last week. After these explosions, it was reported that there were attacks in the airport area. Local residents posted a series of videos featuring the powerful explosions. The explosions were so strong that the sounds of the explosions made the city groan. After the explosions, fireballs rose into the sky. War correspondents monitoring the situation stated that 4 rockets were launched. According to available information, the missiles were launched from the positions of the armed forces of Ukraine and flew to the old city airport of Mariupol. Petro Andriaschenko, advisor to the mayor of Mariupol, noted that the Russian air defense was not able to repel the attacks. Explosions were also heard in the town of Nikolsky in the Mariupol district. A large number of ambulances arrived in the Nikolsky incubator area. A group of Russian soldiers was also destroyed in the Nikolsky explosions. After the clashes and explosions in Mariupol, Russian troops lost a total of 450 soldiers. The Russian army, which has been struggling with casualties since the beginning of the war, has received another deep wound with the latest losses. As we all know, Mariupol is the land corridor between the Crimea and the Donbass. The failures here are also shaking Russia's dominance in Crimea. The Black Sea Peninsula is also home to eruptions. Last night, the Ukrainian armed forces carried out an attack with drones on the Crimean Peninsula. A total of 7 Ukrainian Mugan 5 drones attacked various Russian facilities in different parts of Crimea. In the northern part of the peninsula, the Russian airport Yankuy, the Russian Navy in Sebastopol, and Ukrainian drones attacked in Simferopol. In addition, fierce clashes continued on the eastern front line. Russian troops continue to bombard the positions of the Ukrainian forces near the city of Bakhmut in the Donetsk region. However, only one military conflict has occurred in the past day in the direction of Bakhmut. Russian soldiers opened fire 250 times with different weapons in response. Ukrainian forces also launched attacks as a result of the fierce fighting. 80 Russian soldiers were eliminated, 99 were injured, and 1 Russian soldier was taken prisoner. At the same time, 3 self-propelled howitzers, an electronic warfare system, and an ammunition depot belonging to the Russian troops were all destroyed. In the direction of Kupiansk, the Russians opened cannon fire there 342 times. 2 military clashes occurred by Russian soldiers and 3 airstrikes were carried out. 20 Russian soldiers were eliminated and 52 wounded. Ukrainian army destroyed. Russia's 20 cannon. It is also at the focal point of the attacks in Krasivka, southwest of Bakhmut. Ukrainian 3rd and 5th Assault Brigades continued to attack Plizivka from 2 directions. On the other hand, Barankis, Belgorod, Rostov and Krasnodar, the border cities of the Russian Federation in the west and south, are also helpless against the air attacks of Ukraine. The last day an unmanned aerial vehicle attack took place on the site of the thermal power plant on Severodonskaya Street in Belgorod. According to preliminary data, the drone attacked the power plant, planting 2 explosives on its territory. Shortly before this attack, Maysky settlements, located 20 kilometers from the Ukrainian border in the Belgorod region, was also attacked with the help of unmanned aerial vehicles. On the same day, drones attacked the oil pipeline administrative building in the Peskov region. The incident occurred near the Litvinova locality. The Bazaar Telegraph channel indicated that a Transneft oil pumping station was targeted. The days in Belgorod have been quite active this week. 2 separate units of ethnic Russians, after taking up arms in Ukraine, crossed the border and entered the Belgorod region. Pro-Ukrainian fighters who captured a town in 3 villages as a result of hours of fighting declared that they established the Belgorod People's Republic there. The Kremlin called the attack an act of terrorism by Ukraine. Also this week, 2 drones crashed and exploded in the southern Russian city of Krasnodar. Earlier this month, 2 drones attacked an oil refinery in the Krasnodar region, causing a massive fire. Also, a Ukrainian missile fell at night near an airbase in the Rostov region. In the Dyatkovo settlements in the Bryansk region, the warehouses of the Alexander Research and Production Enterprise, which produces optical systems for military and civilian purposes, caught fire. The fire started at 8:28 am and was extinguished at 9:13 am. The cause of the fire is not yet known. Official authorities have not made a statement on the matter. The company made a difference by producing the Uran 9 tracked unmanned land vehicle with its own products. The Uran-9 vehicle is designed for fire support of ground forces during hostilities and reconnaissance. It should be noted that the city of Dyatkovo is located in the northeast of the Bryansk region. The distance to the Ukrainian border is more than 140 kilometers. It seems that Ukraine aims to wear out Russian soldiers by launching attacks on critical points before launching a large-scale counteroffensive. We will wait and see how Vladimir Putin will respond to this move of Ukraine. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on your notifications. Thank you for watching us.